Cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 7th episode of Coincast, where I am joined with 3 block producers from the EOS blockchain. I have Theo and Eugene from EOS Tribe out of Dallas, or Dallas and Salt Lake. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I've got Luke from EOS DAC. And Luke, I didn't catch where you're out of.
I'm currently in Nashville, Tennessee, but we're pretty much the world. EOS DAC is all over the place.
Okay, very cool. So we were going to have, who was the other? A pile of people, anyways. We had 3 or 4 people that were supposed to come, conflicts. I think this is going to be episode 1 of at least 2, but maybe 3, as it turns out EOS is the most in-depth ecosystem out there to discuss. We're going to be going over questions, a little bit of some commentary. We'll just open discussion. And maybe talk a little bit about some other cryptocurrencies as well. And we're going to be focusing a bit more this week on the voting process and choosing block producers and where that's all going. So how are you all doing, gentlemen?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Fantastic. It's been a fun-filled day.
Yeah, fantastic. Really glad to have you here. So go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for having us, Kurt.
Oh, for sure. No, it's my pleasure. I'm not going to do every question for every person, but the first question I would like to get each of your opinion. So in 1 minute or less, like the 30,000 foot view version, what is EOS in your own words? I will start with Luke, please.
That's one of my favorite questions, actually. I describe EOS as the AWS of blockchain technology. It's essentially like where enterprise businesses around the world are going to go to build decentralized applications for mass adoption. So for me, it's the perfect place to build DACs, and which are decentralized autonomous communities. That's what EOS DAC is all about. We feel like this is a platform where you can actually do that because it can scale and it's global and it can be distributed across the world.
Very cool. Eugene.
I'll go even higher. For me, EOS is first and foremost is a community. That's where it started, and that's what supports this ecosystem. And it's more than a technology. It's actually a digital democracy, and the whole, it's a digital economy, which may provide a new global layer of, governance and economy, which will support the new model of digital, e-commerce and cooperation across the world. That's how I see it. It's connecting different communities around the world.
Very cool. How about you, Theo?
I'll answer it a little bit differently because these guys are the technical guys, and I'm more of a community enthusiast. And so the way I'm looking at it, the way I really came into the EOS space is that, as a planet and as a global society, we're facing some of the biggest issues that we might have ever faced as a species, around climate change, around issues of political and economic corruption. And in a lot of ways, this kind of like this stifling of major solutions and major creativity that happens at various levels. And so how I got into the EOS community and what I see EOS to be on one layer of it is sort of a larger entity that is completely decentralized with almost an infinite number of perspectives that has the capability to really address some of the biggest issues that we're facing. Sure. And then to bring major players on board, technologists, developers, investors, and other enthusiasts and stuff to really participate in creating a whole new wave of solutions that are going to create economic abundance, but also solve some of the biggest problems that we're facing. So that part's actually really exciting for me. And meeting people like Luke and Eugene and just hearing their insights on things, there's a lot of incredible people all throughout the EOS space. And that's sort of one of the main reasons why I'm involved. It's just really exciting to me.
Yeah. I should say, listen, I've been involved in the Bitcoin community since 2013. And I think the narrative has really changed a lot in that community. But listening to all 3 of your guys' feedback, it reminds me of why I got involved in the Bitcoin community early on. So I think that's really, it's exciting to hear where your guys' hearts are at. I asked our pro community from CryptoTradersPro.com about a couple of things that they want to know. They want to know some real surface level stuff. First question is, will Exodus users be able to claim the EOS airdrops, or is that going to be something difficult?
Yeah, I mean, because we've answered this question probably like 100 times in the EOS DAC community. Yes, you can claim them, but you may not be able to directly claim them in Exodus. So Exodus hasn't come out to say they're going to support any of these airdrop tokens, but they do allow you to export your EOS private key. So Exodus has built in the ability to register your Ethereum address, which most people have already done at this point, and then you can export your private key. And one key point about this that I want to raise, a lot of people get confused when they first get into cryptocurrency. They think that their coins actually live in their wallet, like the money they're used to. And that's not the case at all. Your coins live on a blockchain distributed around the world, and all you have is a private key that lets you access them. So as long as you have that EOS private key exported and in your control, number one, that means you actually own the cryptocurrency, because if you don't, someone else does, and you're hoping they give it back to you someday, like an exchange. But two, it means you can take that private key and import it into any wallet, any EOS wallet that you fully trust, that you've compiled yourself maybe, that's been vetted, and then you can access all the tokens that are on there if those airdrop tokens are supported by that in that wallet.
Sure. Very cool. Simple answer. The next question that was asked a lot, somebody noticed that on CoinMarketCap, the DAC token has popped up in I think just the last day or two. So they're wondering when will those be made available? Like when do we get access to these DAC tokens? And are there any exchanges slated to be able to trade them?
So I assume you mean EOS DAC, right? Because there was
correct.
Bitfinex put out a post today about the DAC, or no, it was Binance put out a post about supporting the DAC. In airdrop, and we were kind of like, we contacted you quite a bit for months trying to get you to reply, but oh well.
I could be confused actually.
No, it's probably us. It's probably the EOS DAC token. We were one of the first airdrops to be talked about on the EOS chain, sure. And essentially, there are a number of exchanges that have been supporting it through the entire time. You can go to eosdac.io/exchanges, or you can go to CoinMarketCap and look at currencies, EOS DAC, and then click on the little markets tab, and that'll show all the different exchanges that support it. As for when the native EOS token will be available on the EOS blockchain, hopefully very soon. I mean, I had a number of calls today with our technical team about that. We are working on finalizing our contract, the actual currency code contract. We're going to be testing a whole bunch on the Jungle net test work. The Jungle Test Network. There we go. And if you're on that, you can actually participate a little bit. We're going to probably make a little bit of a game out of it, where if you have an account on the Jungle testnet, you might randomly become a whale of these like test EOS DAC tokens. We're going to be dropping on a bunch of people and playing around with them. Of course, they won't have any value, but it's just a way for us to test our contract, do transfers, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's gonna come pretty soon. And of course, everything we're doing, all the tools we make, we're going to make open for everybody. So I know there's going to be a lot of airdrops on EOS, and hopefully once we get our tools ready and tested and we use it ourselves first and we're confident with it, then we can open up for other people to say, hey, here's how we did it, because everything we build is open source and everybody can use it.
Sure. Very cool. All right. Let's see. There was confusion. One of the questions we've gotten a lot of people have asked me, I do the fundamental analysis with the crypto traders community. I've had a bunch of people ask me, what is Block One's role, and what are the block producers in relation to the EOS chain? Is the chain itself privately owned? Is it public, or is it private? What is the general EOS governance model? I think a lot of people are confused with all the different groups that have EOS in their name, as to what the role is for all the people involved. So I guess it's a 2 or 3 part question there, if anybody wants to take that on.
I can start. So I've been involved in EOS community since last year, and Block One role is software development of open source software. And basically after they have finished the actual development, they just give it to a community, and it's a community role to launch blockchain, which we just did, right? Yeah. And Block One at that point kind of, they just stand back, and all that control is given to a community to actually run a system and support it.
So once everything is fully out the gate, does Block One dissolve, or what becomes a Block One at that point?
Well, I'm sure they will be involved as just one of the players in the community.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding is they're going to continue developing, software around the EOS ecosystem, and there might be, I don't know the details, but I've heard they may be launching or supporting other companies that want to use the technology. So more from a consulting standpoint. I think it's also interesting to note that the code we launched didn't come directly from the Block One repo. The community got together, created a foundation, and essentially created our own repository, and we actually made some modifications to some of the code, some of the contracts, to make sure it better fit kind of what the cryptocurrency ecosystem wants. Like there was some KYC stuff and some other things, and there's some speculation that maybe they kind of made it a little restrictive just to kind of force our hand, to force us to change it so they could point to the lawyers and say, look, it's not our code, they changed it, we don't know what they want. And so there were some strategic things about that.
Yeah.
But it's actually really exciting, though, because it also raises a question of, this is our chain. As block producers, essentially, we are, via the votes of the token holders own the chain, and we're the stewards that they vote in to manage it. And so it's really something that we can all own. And even though Block One is creating most of the code at this point, if in the future we had to get someone else involved, we could do that.
Sure. Yeah. Very cool. Let's see here. So these block producers, are you developers? Is it fair to call you part of the development team, or are you a completely separate thing as a block producer?
Well, I've been a block producer on Steam for a year, so I probably have a good level of experience of how this works. In delegated proof of stake, you essentially just run some software on a server. And that's essentially the basics. Now, it's obviously more complicated than just that. But you run some software, and unlike proof of work in Bitcoin, where it's a big competition to figure out who gets to create the next block with all the transactions and sign with the private key and add it to the system, in this case, we get scheduled. It's cooperation. And so it's more, you'd say, maybe DevOps, like we're managing these servers, we're also supporting the community, and then we're adding value to the community with whatever we're individually doing. So certain block producers have a certain tangent of what they're going to do to provide value for the ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah. I see a block producer role as very important, and you have to wear multiple, hats. And it's multi-layered approach. We have a technology layer and a community and a governance layer, and you have to play and have a significant role in each of those layers. So you work as a DevOps, obviously, running software, maintenance, high availability, making sure it's secure and airtight, and supports the blockchain. And at the same time, you have to play in the community as well. You have to contribute to a community. At the governance layer, it's you kind of an executive branch, so to speak.
Sure.
Right? Because we have judicial system where we could have cases and judgment of those cases, and BPs, the majority of BPs have to take an action on the judgment. So there are so many roles involved in this just one BP. It's much more than just a technical role.
All right. So it's like being a citizen in a society, really, is what it sounds like to me. So, you may be a carpenter for your day job, but you're also a father or somebody that participates in your civic role in your community. Basically EOS is a new function of reality, and you're participating as some kind of a citizen, it seems like.
Yeah, and on that same note, it's what I see. What's happening is a lot of the BPs, they're really like cultural ambassadors. So we're like hiring these, in a sense, elected officials in some sense, that we want to promote a certain technological vision through. And what I see kind of emerging over time is more token holders. Once a lot of the hype is gone in the next few weeks and few months, a lot of the token holders are going to be looking at the space and delving more and more into the culture of a lot of block producers, and asking themselves, well, what's the bigger direction that we want the EOS network to go in the next 5 and 10 years?
Right.
And I'm willing to bet that that's going to be producing, even different candidates in the top 21 that we're not seeing right now, or kind of an evolving changing of the guard, you could say, over time, as certain groups and communities kind of contribute more to the culture. So that's going to be something that I think we're definitely going to see.
Sure. So are the block producers like groups typically, or can an individual just be a block producer? Like, what is it like? Is there something to be expected there? Like when one says, "Hey, I'm a block producer," like like in your culture, is it typical to expect that to be a group or like a corporation, or like what is all that?
It's very diverse, right? Community of BPs, and we have small groups that are organically grown operations, like EOS Tribe, and then we have VC funded, and more like corporate level, block producing candidates with a lot of resources, right? But they bring a totally different culture, I would say, to the community. So it's a question of preference and which way you would like to go.
And then I think we kind of change it up completely by bringing a brand new model that no one's ever seen before, working practically in the real world, with a decentralized autonomous community where we're going to have dynamic roles, and we're going to have 12 custodians voted in by our own token holders of EOS DAC tokens. And I think ultimately what this creates is a really fantastic collaborative competition. It's this idea that we're all working together with a common goal, but we're also pushing each other. When somebody does something amazing, I'm like, oh man, I should have thought of that. What are we going to do to top them? And the end result is everybody in the community benefits, because we're constantly, because of that financial incentive, we're constantly trying to add more value to demonstrate that we're worth the significant pay that a block producer will get. Assuming that the EOS token remains valuable. So that's another part of it too. The infrastructure costs will be really high if this blockchain takes off, and you're going to be seeing block producer run their own data centers. I mean, these all are things that we plan for in the future. It's going to be pretty serious.
You mentioned the common goal. What is the common goal? Like, what is EOS supposed to do? What is that thing?
I would say for me, I would love to hear everyone's opinion, but for me, a common goal is a secure blockchain. That is the number one thing that a block producer is required to do, is to properly fulfill the role of securing the blockchain, producing blocks on time, efficiently, no censorship. I mean, everything, running the protocol as it was designed to be run. Everything else after that is value add. And so to me, that is the number one highest priority. They get very technical people that understand what's going on, have experience doing it, and really know what's behind the sines. And so if there's a problem, and this does happen, I've seen it in Steam, something will come up, there's a bug, there's an issue, having a very responsive team, people around the clock, getting that cell phone, that text message, and they're jumping in, and they're helping contribute to fixes and bugs. That's the number one important thing that has to happen. And so that's why I often say, a really high criteria you should have for your block producer candidates is that they have high technical competency. It's really, really important. It might be, it's nice that a lot of people can communicate well, and that's important. But really, what's really important when your money's on the line, you want a secure blockchain that is being maintained by a lot of people that want to defend it actively.
Yeah.
So on that same note, why I was initially drawn to studying Luke's work with EOS DAC, and then Eugene and Steve working with EOS Tribe, is that when I was asking around, being kind of a non-technical person, or I'm not just a layman, I'm into philosophy and technology. I love this kind of stuff, but I don't understand how a lot of this tech is working. But one of the things I was asking around pretty regularly in the EOS community was, who has the best tech? Like, who is running the best systems right now? Who are the most innovative technologists that are not just bright and understand the technology around it, but also have that edge of visionary capability to really see, where this stuff could go, and then be able to back it up on a technical level. I mean, honestly, that's why I've been so fascinated by EOS DAC and EOS Tribe in the past few months, is because these guys are freaking world class. I mean, honestly, they are. So that right there, to go along with what Luke was saying, anybody can hire a team of amazing developers to create an incredibly secure system. But when you have some of the main, candidates, or some really solid candidates aiming towards block production, they have incredible foundations of technology, and then they have this larger, decentralized, kind of democratic, what do we say? People at the conference were saying it's like libertarian meets socialist ideals coming together as this crazy global experiment of technology. So anyway, that's to go along with what Luke was saying, it's a combination of a lot of different things.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what's really interesting to me about it. Like what I discovered doing the research for this interview is just how diverse even the view is as to what EOS is for. What does it mean? What's the long-term goal for the world. Like for me, I look at the currency use case is what matters to me. I got into this based on basically money activism. I was a gold advocate, and somebody explained Bitcoin to me, et cetera. Here I am 5 years later doing what I do. But does EOS, is the goal of EOS to essentially be an Ethereum replacement or a Bitcoin replacement, or is EOS supposed to essentially replace everything that's ever been there, or is it something completely different? Is it are we pigeonholing it too much by trying to compare it to anything?
What do you think, Eugene?
No, I can say from my, I would not position it as a replacement. I don't think we are here to replace anything. We're at such early stages of this blockchain boom that there's plenty of room for all players. We are in early 90s of internet boom now, blockchain. So I see EOS as a next logical evolution. It's I don't know, Google or...
Right.
I remember Google just came out and it was a small but we're solving problems that have not been solved by existing blockchains. That is what EOS is all about. Yeah. And they also have this governance layer and some of the mechanisms that exist in financial systems that we are all used to that don't exist currently on a blockchain. Account recovery, and so that's what EOS brings, right? It brings that security, benefits of a blockchain, and yet security for end users who are not very, technical, maybe.
Sure.
Yeah, I've also been in the space since 2013. I bought my first Bitcoin in January. I paid $50 and I got 2.5 Bitcoin. And I've just been following this ever since,
Sure.
And I watched how the space kind of ran into trouble in 2014, 2015, 2016, the whole time saying, hey guys, we have some problems with these block sizes. And I saw how the on-chain governance that was needed wasn't there. And so when I look at EOS, I do see some really amazing value adds. Account recovery is a huge one. When Dan first made that for Steam, I was freaking out, saying, "Oh my gosh!" In all the years I've done public-private key encryption, I've never seen anybody come up with a solution where someone could lose their key and still get access to their account again. And it was just an amazing solution. And there's so many other examples. The last irreversible block, the way that it solves Byzantine fault tolerance, the way it has efficiency. It's a really powerful platform, but I also agree it's not a replacement situation. It's kind of like saying, we're building the early internet, but we don't need SMTP or UDP. We just need TCP/IP. It's kind of like, no, you need all of this. You need HTML, you need JavaScript. Everything comes together. You need the last mile last mile problem solved. And all these kind of things. So I think it's an amazing technology. I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited for people who don't understand it now to eventually understand it in the future when they start using it without realizing they're using it. That's the point where I'm going to say, yes, EOS has arrived. When there's all these amazing applications that are highly functional, highly usable, with incredible UX, UI, where the users themselves don't even realize they're on a blockchain, but then they understand, oh, I can't be censored. They understand, oh, I'm earning currency that no government can confiscate or control. And it just, the theories behind the philosophy, the crypto anarchy behind all this stuff, the economic theory will really drive some freedom in some amazing ways.
For sure.
Definitely.
Awesome. So changing subject a little bit, is there a minimum amount of EOS required to be a block producer? I'm a trader, so there are times when I have a whole bunch of EOS, and there are times when I don't. I like the project, so I have some that I don't trade, but my primary source of income is to trade. So if I wanted to become a block producer, is there a minimum I need to obtain, or is it, can I have a 10 and have my stake and that's where I'm at?
The short answer is no, minimum required. So you can go with, as little as you can stake 1 EOS and create an account and register as a producer. So there's no minimum required.
Okay. How about the way it's held? I've heard some criticisms in some places that EOS is just a bunch of people running on Amazon Web Service, and they're not running their own servers. And actually, I think it's a criticism of many new projects is that all the nodes are just on Amazon. So it's possible that Amazon is running 90% of all of the cryptocurrency on the planet. But Is that a problem, or is that something you can do, or do you guys like try to keep, offsite nodes and double backed up and diesel generators, or what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that it's often this whole like cloud versus bare metal. I think it's a little bit of a red herring, because ultimately what matters is the technical skill and competency of your server administrators and their understanding of network security protocols. Like, you can be on the most secure system ever, and if you got a guy who doesn't know how to secure it properly, it's gonna get owned. And that's just the truth. It doesn't matter if you're on a cloud or it's a server in your basement or you're in some bunker. If it's not secured correctly, if it's connected in any way, shape, or form to the internet, you're done. So I like to take a kind of balanced approach to say, one, no one should ever know the IP of your producing node. You should have secured that correctly. You should be only connecting to nodes that you completely trust as far as your outbound traffic, and your multiple backups, as far as your read-only nodes that are going to be used by the community, your full API nodes. These should have redundancy throughout the system. And for me, it's like, if those are on a cloud, it's no big deal. I mean, if somebody starts DDoSing an IP, you could spin up another IP and no problem. If Amazon, East goes down, you can quickly fire up another system somewhere else. I do think that when it comes to your block producer node, though, it should be on hardware that you absolutely trust and it's very secure. So there's a reason for that to be on bare metal, just because you don't have to trust another organization even more. But you're always going to have to trust your ISP. You're always going to have to trust the competency of the server farm that you're in. But even then, if there's an issue, that's the whole point of having these hot backups. And the way it works is you sign with a new production key, and you're immediately producing on a new block and a new location, and you can have multiple servers ready to go to take up that space at any time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So Luke, I know that EOS Tribe has their system set up in 3 different locations, 2 of them being main backups. Tell us about that, Eugene?
I can answer that question. So, because I was setting it all up.
Yeah, great.
EOS Tribe was a part of a Ghostbusters team and BP infrastructure group, where we worked on security standards and kind of best practices for BP infrastructure and recommendations on what it should look like. And yes, there is a discussion in BP community of AWS versus bare metal. Obviously, we don't want everyone on AWS. We don't want one company own our entire infrastructure. So we do run all our production nodes and our redundant full nodes on bare metal. But in terms of public APIs that we expose, on internet, it's fine to have it in AWS. And, we use cloud instances in this case, and we use multiple with load balancing and protection for DDoS. And if DDoS does happen, it will have zero impact on our actual production, servers.
Cool. Awesome. So the next...
can I put something in context for a second?
Sure.
Luke, were you guys part of EOS Core also?
Yeah. Michael Yates has been really pivotal in all the way back from the original superhero testnet. Michael and Rob have done a great job, and I haven't really been involved in a lot of that up until more recently, just kind of learning what they've been doing, and it's pretty awesome stuff.
So, Kurt, what I wanted to kind of tie in the viewers a little bit about, just so they can understand how, so essentially, again, in relative layman's terms, when the testnet was released several months ago, that basically put the base code into the hands of the developers to prepare their own systems to get ready to launch, right? And then as EOS was launching onto the mainnet, there were essentially different factions who were competing to be those initial ones to set up and release the foundational mainnet for the rest of the larger community to use, and then for block producers to begin to stake on it and for voting to begin. One of the things I was so fascinated by EOS DAC and EOS Tribe is because they were both members. I believe also EOS 42 was part of a group called EOS Core. And they were essentially, they proved themselves to be the leading edge, tech support at that time to get the actual mainnet going in the beginning.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was interesting for me as just a basic token holder to kind of follow that. That was, you know what I mean? So in that sense, it was a very organic process. It was whoever has the best code, whoever can build the best infrastructure to support the launch of the system. That's who got to launch the mainnet.
Sure.
Yeah, and it should be clear, it wasn't without drama. There's a lot of different personalities. When you're on a call with 130 different people, a Zoom call, all these video, people from around the world, and they're translating and stuff. and there's a little bit of ego involved, a little bit of this, that, and the other. But I think ultimately we all came together to say what's the best process. And I'm really impressed with the way they ended up doing it. Essentially, the community set forth what the criteria they felt was the minimum criteria for launching the chain, a good block producer. And then we came up with 11 entries, and then those were randomly picked essentially in a very interesting way between Kevin from EOS New York and David Moss, and they kind of figured out something everyone agreed was fair. And then we have what's called the ABP, the anonymous block producer, and that has kind of bootstrapped the chain up until the point we can get, we're hopefully it'll happen while we're on this call. We're about 60% in. Once we get that 150 million staked votes of EOS tokens, then the chain will run, and the top 21 producers will essentially have like a multi-key shared access to control the chain in essence.
Sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it is possible it could happen while we're on the call, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. I wish we had like a countdown or something like that.
It still might be a couple days though, right?
It could be. I mean, there's no way to know, but
yeah, I know it's kind of iffy, but yeah, I've had people asking me, and I my understanding was that it's not really crystal clear how to estimate. So,
and the community just like kind of came together yesterday to even recommend a voting wallet, or a couple like Scatter and Greymass's, EOS voter tool, like. So, we're in some ways we're playing catch up because we just got the code. There were code changes the day before we launched. So these are things that are happening, and we're just rolling with it as a community. Yeah. And I'm really impressed with how people have stayed for the most part pretty level headed.
Yeah. Well, I've seen from, some of the critics, like I've noticed from the Ripple community has mentioned a couple like, oh, they're a mess. Like there's there's all these bugs, and the hackathon was. The hackathon was a really cheap way to have other people responsible for the code that they should have had ready to go, that kind of thing. So is any of that valid, or is it just, just criticism from your competitors?
It's a corporation critiquing open source community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's always the same argument, right?
Sure.
I think they might be a little scared.
I agree.
I think they're definitely a little scared. I mean, as they basically should be. And what a lot of people, I had one of my teachers who I had convinced to invest a little bit in EOS, and he sends me this article that's straight FUD, very well written FUD, about the whole EOS launch. And one thing that people need to recognize, if they don't have that kind of an inside eye on seeing how it's all unfolding, this is like democracy at the most powerful, raw level.
Sure.
With some incredibly intelligent people involved and a lot of different interests involved. Mm-hmm. And so naturally there's going to be a lot of mistakes and delays or here and there as things work out. And to me, as kind of an observer and a partial participant, that's part of the fun. I mean, this is a new thing. You know what I mean?
A lot of people are used to, top-down hierarchical structures of like, we're going to tell you what to do and we're going to tell you how to do it. And very few people are used to order emerging out of chaos, and which I think is very, very like ironic because you look all around nature and that's all you see is an amazing amount of order that just bubbles up out of this chaos of natural interactions of all these different very complex ecosystems. So it's kind of a retraining of our species on the way things actually work in the world. And I think it's a good thing. I think we're kind of going back to our roots a little bit in ways where, we just couldn't do it before because the technology didn't exist. And now we can. Networks can be just as efficient as hierarchies. And that's just never been possible before. I'm really excited about it.
It's incredible. I can't tell you how many times I've had to ask people, what animals would do without farms,
Yeah, really.
I think we're getting ready to see. So that's exciting. Yeah. One of the questions I think obviously the big limitation to any of this is going to be worldwide governments. When I look at who's really stands to lose the most, like the argument to be made, banks, general hierarchies, but who's a bigger general hierarchy than the state itself? Looking at DPoS, proof of stake mechanisms, this has been a big criticism that I've had of Lightning Network as well, is that staking sort of opens you up to like a regulatory surface of attack. So if the government can make the argument that you're an unlicensed money transmitter, or that stakers are being, quote unquote, promised dividends, that kind of thing, like one of the things that really stood out to me when Ethereum was being discussed as, whether it is or is not a security, was the fact that it was proof of work mined. Like that seemed like the case really hinged on that fact. So do you think there's any, is there any validity to that? Like, should we be concerned that a DPoS system could be treated as a money transmission tool without a license, or is there some kind of a way for the camel to get his nose under the tent simply because of the proof of stake mechanism or DPoS more specifically?
It's definitely a concern in a community, and it's a risk for every BP. It's a risk. And especially us running in US. All of us, we know there's a regulation existing in US.
Yeah.
We do run that risk, but we prefer to, we're kind of pioneering, and we take that risk, and we prefer to ask for forgiveness rather than permission from the government.
Yeah, I love that.
So basically, yes, the government could take a legal action against the BP, but BPs, not even in US, any other country, different jurisdictions, that risk exists, and they could be brought offline by legal actions.
Sure.
But we have to keep in mind that EOS is a global blockchain with many nodes supporting it. And so if any BP is taken offline, another will take its place in a different jurisdiction, and blockchain itself will not suffer any loss of such actions. But the government, I would argue, will stand to lose of innovation and stake in this new digital economy.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
I think they've kind of learned through the peer-to-peer file sharing systems of the past that you can't shut down a peer-to-peer network. You have to evolve, adapt, and survive. Without shutting down the internet, there's really no way to shut it down. Right. And so from that perspective, I do think that they see this as the future. I do think that essentially, all these cryptocurrencies, money is just a story that we collectively believe, and they recognize that the story of gold and silver and now fiat currency is kind of not as good a story as a globally, distributed nonviolent consensus that is cryptographically secure. And so people look at this and say, that's a better story. Let's put our money there. And so I think that governments do want to be a part of the new economy. It's like if one government was mining gold and no one else was, and gold became the world reserve, currency, then you'd be sure that all those governments would be like, we better get some gold miners. We better have some guys who know how to use mining equipment. And I think it's the same kind of thing. We're going to need, the governments recognize they're going to need delegated proof of stake, professionals. They're going to need people that understand these blockchains. And as far as the money transmitter part, clearly we're not lawyers. Nobody's here is a lawyer, so we should state that clearly. But at the same time, we have somewhat of a precedent for this, like ISPs that people use them to transfer information. They have the takedown request, and they say, hey, put this down. It's usually the website that they go after. So my hunch is it's going to be the applications, the dApps that are built on EOS. Those are going to be the front-facing interface that the government's going to look at and say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. It's against our rules. You need to stop that. But the block producers, we're essentially, I look at them as a lower layer protocol. We're just running this protocol. And it's really just bits going back and forth.
Right. So that's interesting. I think as a follow-up, what's to stop a nefarious player from becoming a block producer? Like there's been discussion of Bitfinex using customer funds in order to be a large vote. There's also some people have complained. A lot of people don't like this Fly to Mars group. They don't know who they are or where they're from, but they seem to be the bad guys. They're breaking the rules, allegedly. Is there a mechanism within the EOS system to kind of mitigate threats from, what's to stop the U.S. government or the Russian government or somebody from, gaining some super majority of EOS and having a bunch of votes? Is there a way to bypass that kind of thing?
I mean, technically, I don't see that there's a way to stop it because it's such an organic process. Naturally, these players are going to be involved. What I do see that's very unique about EOS in particular and other blockchain communities, but really especially what EOS is doing, is that over time I see a larger kind of cultural check and balance system unfold. One of the things that was proposed at the Tulip conference last weekend and discussed a lot was this idea of making the major stakeholders in each BP transparent, making it so the world and the rest of the community can see who's behind what, and this isn't to discourage VCs or major token holders. This is actually to just raise the standard for everybody. And I think that, so in the beginning, we might see all sorts of, shadow corporations, shadow government kind of stuff that are putting major funds into it because they see it for either as an economic gain or as a way to stifle certain grassroots political evolution from occurring in different ways. There's a lot of different reasons why they would do that. But I think over time, I mean, this is one of the smartest community of technologists I've ever encountered. Then they're all over the various layers of the internet. And, a lot of us are very well versed in the myth and the lore of the internet. So we see through a lot of BS.
Sure. I'm sure.
I was going to say with that too, the beauty of the system is every single thing is in a mutable ledger. So if you ever, as a block producer, try to do something, if you try to, for example, censor a vote to say, oh, I see, and I'm going to analyze this group of transactions I'm about to sign in this block, within 500 milliseconds, and then I'm going to say, ooh, that's a vote for one of my competitors or my competing government, let's say, and I'm a government controlling this block producer, I'll just let that one not be included. What's going to get included in the very next block, by the way, but also it's obvious. Like everyone knows. I clicked vote and it didn't go through. What happened? Oh, who was producing at that timestamp? Oh, it's these guys. They have a history of doing that. Oh, look, we have a reg producer Ricardian contract that actually says they will never do that. And they did. So guess what? We can freeze their tokens. We can lock them up. So there's all these beautiful aspects to it. But there's another, it's an evolution. We're not quite there yet because the Constitution right now, everyone using the EOS blockchain hasn't really agreed to it technically. It's kind of more a code of conduct. And so we've been talking about that with our team quite a bit, how we can kind of spread the knowledge and awareness of that. And I wrote something last night. We haven't published it or anything, but I've been thinking about this to say, hey, can we start with the the block producers and get them to maybe sign a message or something, say, hey, we actually agree on as of this block, this block number to the Constitution for every block previous and all the way forward. Then we get the block producer setting that standard. And then maybe we can start modifying the claim rewards transaction, for example, or the reg producer transaction to say, yeah, if we're going to do these, we also agree with the Constitution. And then we can start moving forward so that when we do have bad actors, hopefully at some point we only take action against people who actually did voluntarily enter into an actual contract. Because right now it's kind of just, we hope that you read this. It would be nice if you did, kind of a thing. But we'll get there. It's an evolution. We're exploring new forms of governance, and there's been days and days and days, hours and hours and hours at the EOS governance channel discussing all this stuff, and it's new territory.
That's incredible. Totally. What are your thoughts about Bitfinex using customer funds to be a big vote? Essentially, is that it struck me as patently unethical to stake somebody else's stuff. Of course, people are leaving it there also, but what are your thoughts on that in a basic sense?
I have some strong opinions about if you hold your cryptocurrency on an exchange, it's not actually yours. It's theirs, and you're hoping they give it back to you someday. You have to control your private key to control your cryptocurrency. Now, that said, in the Constitution, you're not supposed to be able to vote for someone else unless they give you express consent and you become their proxy. Okay. So if that's the case, and I know Binance, their announcement today, they did have a process where you say yes or no, I will allow you to be my proxy. As long as they go through that process, then I can't fault them. I'm certainly concerned specifically with exchanges that are also BPs because that potentially creates a certain conflict. But at the same time, they're providing a great value to their users. So if those users want to support them in that way, and maybe that lowers the exchange fees that they have to pay, I can understand there's going to be all these different interesting dynamics of how block producers provide value to their community, and those are all going to have to be scrutinized and evaluated. There are a lot of people that are giving EOS DAC a lot of concern because we did an airdrop of a free token and then later the token had value. So, we're going to have to analyze all of these because vote buying is a very serious problem in delegated proof of stake. We need to be very clear that we're never going to give a reward to someone if they vote for us. That cannot happen in our system. We have to be very clear that you vote for the best people to secure the chain, and that's it. Value creation after that is up to each individual community, and it's got to not be connected to a vote.
Sure.
So I would like to add also, we are building an interesting experiment, right? What we are trying to recreate is digital democracy. And with that system, even well-intentioned, right, we as human species, we have the problem of corruption. Always comes up in a society. We try to fight it. We are trying to build a system around it to fight the corruption, but it always comes up. And it will be an interesting experiment how we will deal with it in this new environment. But I'm sure we'll have to deal with similar problems we have dealt as society as long as we exist for thousands of years. Ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
Problems.
I'd say that often. We're not reinventing the problems or the solutions. We're just going to rediscover what's already worked and what hasn't, and we're just going to put a new spin on it with the new technology we have. Absolutely.
Sure.
Well said, Eugene.
Yep.
A quick question. Do block producers get paid in a block reward like a miner does? Are you essentially the miners of the DPoS system?
Yeah.
Plain and simple, yeah. Just there's a block reward if you're the producer who mined the block, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's a similar thing between the main difference being that cooperation over competition. Like in proof of work, it's almost like you get 10,000 people to do some work, and then 10 minutes later you throw away 9,999 of the answers, and you only take one, and then you're like, okay, start again, and it just seems very, very wasteful. And that waste is on purpose. There's an economic reason for that. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the block rewards. They have to be high enough that it's it attracts the very best people. Like Theo, you're saying, this is some of the best technologists that you've ever seen. It has to be this thing you want, but it can't be wasteful. And so it's got to be that right balance. And I think DPoS finds it pretty well.
Cool.
Yep.
So then also block producers are going to be chosen by vote. So people get to vote on who those block producers are. But before the mainnet launch, is it a trusted setup? Does somebody pick who the initial group, this process that's happening right now, to get the mainnet fully launched and all the block producers chosen? Is there one time we're going to, somebody's going to make an executive decision who the first group is, and then it becomes fully democratic from there? Or what does that first initial, the launch look like?
So I can say, as one of the earlier BP candidates, we went through this vetting process. We announced our BP candidacy, and we said, yes, we are running, this is our name. And then we participated in testnets. We were testing different versions of software. We were working in a community, and it was really hard work. We would be on a call day and night with guys around the world, until 5 a.m., 6 a.m., especially before, last few weeks. And so we were putting all that time and effort into community, and we were discovering bugs and reporting them and fixing and retesting again, and cycle after cycle we do this. And this was just a preparation. But technically, all it comes down to get listed as a block producer on a blockchain is for you to announce yourself on the blockchain as a block producer candidate. And then everything else depends on how well you're known in a community, and people voting for you, basically based on your merit.
Okay.
Yeah, and right now, like Eugene was saying, there's we're still in that Genesis block process where there is, a single producer, but I describe it as like a runaway train going down the tracks. There's no one running it anymore. The keys have been given up. It has no control. No one can jump in and do anything at this point.
Sure.
We just have to, the protocol is designed that it has to reach that 15%. And that's kind of the way the whole world agrees. This is the one mainnet chain that we're all going to call EOS. There isn't one secret one out there somewhere that has used the same symbol token that is privately getting a bunch of whales to vote for it. This is the main one we're all agreeing to. And once that 15% hits, then that's when the block rewards to the actual top 21 producers start. Okay. And then we start getting rewards, and that's where we're actually signing blocks with our own key. And that's where we actually have governance control as well. And that's another part. I think it gets people a little bit scared, is recognition that these 21, we actually do have the ability to go in and modify things. And that's the reality of how it is. And that's why it's so important that you vote for people you trust.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
So how easily, let's say some psycho group gets into that first 21 and just starts tearing the network up. How easy is it for the other 20 block producers or everybody else to vote and get rid of that person quickly? Is that something that can be taken care of in hours or days or?
Yeah. I'll give you an example, and I don't. name names because it was just an honest mistake. But on the Steam blockchain just a few months ago, there was a group of people, and their main guy was unavailable, and their backup node and their main node started double producing. That's where they were both signing blocks when it was their assigned time at the same time, and that causes a mini fork in the chain every single time it happens. Sure. And if you're producing blocks every 63 seconds, like in Steam, that's a really big problem. So it started actually impacting applications that were just streaming off the last block. They weren't going to the last irreversible block, and that. Immediately, I mean, it was just like everyone saying, we got to unvote them immediately. We got to bump somebody else in their position. And it was within hours. I mean, it wasn't a day. It wasn't a half a day. I think it was about 45 hours they were bumped out. And that was it was a really big deal. But it was also a nice test case to say, look, this actually works. You can get motivated people involved to change their votes. Okay.
What about 51% attack? I did a little research. It seems like it's 72% would be what would be needed for a double spend. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's 2/3 plus 1, essentially.
Okay. Gotcha.
And even then, it would be quite difficult. I mean, I have friends that are super, super smart, and they've worked out these crazy ways that you could have a segmented network, and both sides of the network, if they couldn't talk to each other, would think that they're still having consensus. But it's just so practically impractical that it's not gonna happen.
What about like a contentious hard fork? If there was a group, let's say Bitfinex and Binance and a bunch of people, they've got all their EOS. How easy would it be for them to hard fork and create, EOS Premium or whatever?
They would essentially run their own network. There's no way that they could change the consensus of the code without the 2/3 plus 1. So if they wanted to try to run some new hard fork thing, all their blocks would be rejected because it doesn't follow consensus.
Okay, very cool. One of the questions that came up out of the group, like we ran a poll, like, hey, what should I ask? A bunch of people said that they don't like the necessitation of using their private key for the sake of voting. Everybody was really, really adamant about the necessity for getting Ledger or Trezor support as quickly as possible. And they also wanted to ask, is it Tokenica or Tokenica, the offline solution? Is that a viable option that you would recommend as well?
Good question.
So I don't know if you guys used it. I've heard about. I know the team. I know the very smart engineers based in Poland, I believe. I have, based on what I have seen, it looks like it's a legitimate way to probably secure. Currently, the most secure ways that I know and I have tested is kind of technical and involved, where it actually takes you to compile EOS code, then use an EOS client to connect to API endpoint, and then do all your voting all you want, right?
Right.
But it's not for a regular person to do it. So it's not the easiest way. I think Tokenica came out with an offline where you can prepare the transaction and then just send it, but you never reveal your private key.
Right.
And next best approach would be to use Scatter. Scatter, I believe, is a good tool. It's like a wallet, which you import your private key, but it never sends your private key. It's using a signature instead, which is like a hash. And they have integration with voting portals that you can use to vote.
I would also recommend the tool by Graymass. That's what we've been recommending to our tools. I've used it myself. Aaron Cox and Scott, they built Vessel that I've been using for 2 years on Steam. They're very well respected, and that also just signs locally, uses strong encryption on your local computer. You don't have to trust DNS if you're going to some website or something like that. Right. So that's the one that I often recommend.
Cool. Theo, any feedback there? Is there something you use to vote or?
I mean, I just want what's going to be the easiest. That's going to be the most secure, obviously. Yeah. I used Scatter to vote. I liked it. It was a good experience. If I had known about Graymass before, and seen that, I would have checked it out. Sure. But yeah, I mean, spending time with a lot of these people, especially in the communication and in the communities who are talking about the deeper, things that are coming up as they're developing this stuff. Things like Scatter look from a design perspective to be really, really secure. So that made me feel a little bit more confident. But yeah, I mean, sharing private keys, we do all this work and all this research and get all excited, and then we put this little key in the hands of a stranger because they've got a nice interface. It's definitely, but I think confidence is going to grow in the community over time. as a lot of these applications show to be just really, really secure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, is it possible to spoof or have some kind of phishing attack for that kind of thing? Like if somebody were to pretend to be and just basically take your private key. I haven't done it myself. I don't know what any of those interfaces look like. Would that be something difficult to do, or is it?
I would say don't ever put your private key ever into a website ever.
Right.
That's kind of rule number one. Now there are web applications that are built that are designed to be run offline. That happens.
Yeah.
But you have to be pretty technically savvy to understand whether or not you got to run sniffers in the background on your computer and stuff. You got to know whether or not it's sending any information online as it's signing that message, and that stuff should be done offline. I really do think we'll have Trezor and Ledger Nano support very soon. I mean, again, the software is just being developed, so I don't fault them for not having it ready out the gate. This stuff is changing all the time. But I do imagine that they understand how large this community is and how much this community is going to demand support. And I think that if they don't get it done, we'll definitely have some worker proposals out there to pay them well to get it done, because we want it as well.
Sure.
And two, that's the nice thing about EOS. We got 4% inflation going to worker proposals. There's going to be a lot of money going to people building amazingly secure and awesome systems.
Definitely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. So at face value, EOS, again, I've had people be like, yeah, it's basically Ethereum, but better and faster and that kind of thing. And I always say, like, well, it's more than that. But what's the best way? This is probably a good question for Theo. Again, like, what is the best way for somebody who is like really baseline, like they have a Coinbase account, they've used Bitcoin a little bit. Like, what would be the best way for somebody to dip their toe into the EOS ecosystem and see if it's something they even can grasp or care to be part of? Where do they start?
Are you talking about like ideologically or around ideas or like a?
Yeah, it sounds like there's so many ways to be active in the group, but I mean, let's just say I meet some anarchist type who knows he doesn't like the system and might have a little bit of Bitcoin because of that. And if I explain to him that, hey, EOS is great for XYZ reasons, like where should I send him to kind of learn more and maybe like participate, like not just buy a little bit of EOS and leave it in a wallet or whatever.
I mean, the way that I've personally learned over time is honestly by following the work of a lot of the different BP candidates. Yeah. And there's a lot of really good information being put out. EOS DAC and EOS Tribe are both, for months and months, they've been releasing really impressive information to educate the community. Yeah. So that's a really awesome way to start, is really, people in the crypto space and blockchain in general tend to be kind of like navigators of the wild sea, you could say. A lot of us are used to figuring things out here and there. It's still such a leading edge technology. We're not, we're, as Luke was saying, we're a ways away from mass adoption. Yeah. But on a side note, when I explain it to people, like what's the significance of networks like EOS and the technologies of blockchain in particular, one of the things is that in 2012, 2013, I'm a filmmaker. So my film team and I set out to understand what the most leading edge technologies were to solve some of the biggest issues. And that led us into creating a documentary film that focused on decentralized energy systems, solar and wind. And, and how literally communities all over the country and all over the planet are utilizing these very new technologies in ways that were really disrupting spaces. So the old economic model, the old governmental models, they actually couldn't wrap their minds around a community owning its own solar and wind grids. You know what I mean? So for several years, I've been fascinated by decentralized systems. Mm-hmm. And that led me into studying the work of Jeremy Rifkin. I know that Luke and I talked about the economist and philosopher Jeremy Rifkin, and who's introduced ideas around like the third industrial revolution based upon decentralized energy systems. But in all the time that we were making our film project and that we were studying Rifkin, blockchain was still emerging. So he wasn't quite talking about it so much then. So for me to put it in context to friends is that in order for this larger decentralized revolution to occur, we actually need a decentralized platform, a blockchain platform, to be able to not just rapidly share information, but to create a new like model and culture that's going to get the entire world thinking in decentralized ways. Sure. You know what I mean? So again, so when I gravitate, towards groups like EOS DAC and EOS Tribe, like these guys are, again, they have the technology, but they're really moving forward that decentralized democratic vision that I think is really going to surface amongst a lot of the major block producers in the next couple of weeks and few months for sure.
Dale, it's so awesome to hear you talk about that, because it's like in the months that I've been working together with the EOS DAC launch team, so much of what we're doing is not just the EOS DAC toolkit. It's not just our 20-page, constitution. It's actually building the tools that we can work together as human beings, because there's that old model of thinking. There are situations where someone on the team will say, well, I instructed so-and-so to do that. And we'll have to be like, nobody instructs anyone. There's no leaders. There's no rulers. It's all just, we all have our special gifts and the things that we provide, but it is really this new model of thinking. If we're all doing what we do best, and we're all, working efficiently as best we can, and we're all encouraging and helping each other. I mean, even just today I had a call with some of the team members, and they were asking me to kind of take on a couple new official roles. And I was kind of like, I kind of don't want any titles, right? Like that's like, I don't want anyone to follow me because they know that I have a title. Hopefully they'll listen to what I have to say because they I know what I'm talking about, right? Like that's the goal, right? That's what I'm hoping for. And I think that it's exactly demonstrating that model in a way that works and is efficient and effective. And then because everyone says, well, you can't do that in the real world. Well, it's like, what if we can? And then what if we can show it working very efficiently? And we, like Theo said, we had a whole bunch of fun hanging out at the Tulip Conference in San Francisco, talking about the Zero Marginal Cost Society. It was the last book I read, and it was a fun conversation because it really is this collaborative common system where it's kind of the new version of how we can cooperate together to really increase value for everybody. Yeah. And it's still basic, capitalist kind of economics, but it also transforms it in a whole new way that makes it cooperative and collaborative. And it's really amazing.
Yeah. Well, on that same note, what I think about is the sociologist and media analyst Marshall McLuhan, where he basically says, like, when you create any form of media, that media itself, it's not just what comes through that media, but the media itself influences consciousness, the format, the way that it exists. And so in the old hierarchical model, we had, just a small handful of TV companies telling us the same news every night. And then the internet erupts, and that begins the decentralization revolution. And so people begin to see themselves as able to navigate different information sources. What's happening with blockchain that I really see, especially in the EOS community, is that it's giving power to average people to say, wait a second, like, I can participate with this technology. It's not just me using it or owning a few tokens. I can actually, like, literally bring my unique self to this technology, and the actual ecosystem is going to flourish more abundantly because of that contribution. Mm-hmm. So
that's so cool. I hear you say that, and I'm like, wait, is that the Medium is the message guy? And I Google it real quick. I'm like, yeah, it's the same dude. The Medium is the message. Yeah. I've seen that same book.
But, it's true, though. So think about it. When we have a new technology that's showing everybody that I mean, look at how nature operates. Nature is the ultimate decentralized, OG, when it comes to decentralizing its entire networks, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's the nature is the starfish and the spider, essentially, so it's producing all those things. And so just even people engaging with the space, it's going to change consciousness and culture in ways that we're only beginning to to glimpse at. And that's why I think having more philosophically aligned and evolutionary minded block producers to help lead that culture, that's going to really influence how things unfold in the next 5 years. Very cool.
It was killer sound clip answer right there.
Yeah.
So on that note, like, what does like success look like? Like, when do you guys break out that like $10,000 bottle of wine you got on the shelf, like, and say, like, guys, we did it. We did it all the way. Like, what's the dream at scale? EOS accomplished. What does that look like? I'd like an answer from each of you. Like, what is the victory party? What's the thing that happens the week before the victory party?
Wow. I have a lot of like personal views on this that I don't know I can represent the entire EOS DAC, but my anarchist voluntarist roots might come out a little bit here when I say that the goal is global nonviolent consensus. The goal is no longer having a monopoly on the use of force in geographic regions that we call nation-state governments. The goal is that we have people all human interactions are voluntary, that no human being has the right to own or rule over another human being. That's my personal, I think that's why I'm so attracted to products that Dan Larimer builds. He talks about protecting life, liberty, and property. And I noticed recently he added the word justice, which I thought was kind of interesting in his little tagline when he talks about this stuff. But to me, that's the goal, is that my children are going to live in a more free, autonomous, voluntary society. And I think that's the progression of where we've been going. Sure. And so I'm very optimistic, and I'm very passionate, but I'm also not naive. I know that there's huge challenges. I know that those who have power don't give it up easily. And essentially, I want to do the Buckminster Fuller, like out innovate around them kind of thing. We'll just build something so much better that eventually people just, stop worrying about the guys with guns, and the guys who have the guns, it's the trigger finger that matters. And they're just going to be like, well, why do I do that? I could just go work for the blockchain and make more money and be better off feeding my family. So that's where I'm at. It's a pretty grand vision. It may not happen in our lifetime, but I'm hoping it does.
Yeah, amen to that.
And for me, it's a journey. It's not the finish line. I don't see a finish line. We are just the beginning of this journey, and and we will not, in our lifetime, we will not complete it. Our children will have to continue, and we are just at the beginning of this journey. And
well said.
The journey alone is what is worth it. Basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to reaffirm what both of these guys are saying. I always get so excited, hearing creatives and technologists talk in these ways, because to think that these are two of the most brilliant dudes in the game right now, that and this is the way they think, is really exciting for an average person like myself.
For sure.
But the way I see it with blockchain in particular, and definitely the EOS network, but I'll just address EOS, is when it is so ubiquitous that it's not even thought of anymore. It's so commonplace that we have literally millions of kids, and we have millions of random users who say, I want to create this, or I want my own control of my data in these ways. I no longer want corporations to control my data. I want my own data to be mine, which is our right. I believe it's our given right to own our information in this information age, and so that's going to emerge as an entire system, to go along with what Luke was saying, is that it's going to evolve into a whole, system over time that creates more freedom, that creates hopefully more creativity and more innovation. And I agree with Eugene. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take decades and decades to do it. But from all of my research and experience, EOS is probably the greatest potential at contributing enough of that power to the larger global community that I've really ever seen.
Very cool. So we're getting close to wrapping up. I got a couple more things I want to touch on with you guys. Simple one. What's your opinion on Bitcoin going forward? I feel like Bitcoin, 7 transactions per second. Bitcoin Core has said there's no reason to ever do more than that. And I've had people arguing with me that they need to lower the block size to 200 kilobytes, and the block times need to only be an hour, and that's what's important for sound money. And I was a big block supporter from early on. I wanted to run a Bitcoin Unlimited node, and then that was my first exposure to the block size, the scaling debate. And to me, bigger blocks just made sense. So it seemed like the reasonable way to go. And there was this giant Bitcoin split. And I think there was a time when all of this stuff, everything you guys are talking about, could have been Bitcoin dApps, and all these things could have, theoretically, happened. And of course, you could look at EOS as an evolution of that, the concepts, and taking it a step further. But I have to ask everybody, do you think there's a role for Bitcoin, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And then what do you think of Bitcoin Cash as a response to Bitcoin desiring to be one very specific thing? Can Bitcoin Cash, by simply raising the block size, compete, in this new world with things like, DPoS and other things? So what do you guys think?
Like I said earlier, I've been in this space for a while, so I got to see this happen. And I remember, I remember when people were talking about this and they were doing screenshots of like, here's what Satoshi said, like block number equals, we'll raise the size and all that. And I saw the market share go from 80-something% down to 35%. And I saw people like Rick Falkvinge, who he wrote a post in 2013 that got me excited about Bitcoin, saying, hey guys, like this is a problem. So I saw it coming from a while off, this problem. And at the same time, I remember tweeting back and forth with Andreas Antonopoulos in 2013, and like, that guy's also a genius and he's not as concerned. So I listened to him saying, yeah, you probably only need one proof of work blockchain on the whole planet. And all these other ones, and you go to like crypto51.com, you see how easy it is to, attack these. And so it's, I think it's kind of like I'm really big on steemit.com, the social media platform, and I've posted, 11,000, 12,000 comments and posts there, and I still use Twitter and Facebook. It's not like I still use all these tools to benefit my life and benefit my community and to be engaged with people I care about. So I don't look at it as so much competition of, is this going to be replaced? Is this still going to be around? I look at each one is going to have their place. I have, like you mentioned earlier, Lightning Network. I have a little bit of concerns with that. I was in the shopping cart industry for credit cards for 10 years building my business. And so when I look at that, I'm like, I think I've seen that before. It's kind of like, here's the banks, here's the merchant accounts, here's the payment gateways. Like, it looks a lot similar to what I've already seen. So, I do have some concerns about it. But I also recognize that, there are certain patterns that work. And this may be a pattern that works. And in a sense, the delegated proof of stake, the witnesses, the block producers, they're kind of a similar kind of somewhat more centralized pattern for efficiency reasons. So I think there's going to be trade-offs between the different systems. And as far as the bigger blocks, I do like, Rick's Reacts videos. He's put out there talking about how these things can scale. I've been to Anarchapulco and listened to Roger Ver talk about his perspectives. And, he's a whole nother character we could go off on. But ultimately, he has experience in watching these technologies evolve and expand. And he's, many people are confident that bigger blocks would be fine and not a problem. Yeah. So I think it's going to be just another aspect of the evolution. And I think there are going to be a lot of coins that just fall along the wayside because they can't keep up with global demand. And there's going to be some that adapt and evolve. And that's going to include SegWit and Lightning Network and who knows what else. But ultimately, I think more people are going to figure out DPoS once they understand it and they start using it. They're going to like it.
Sure. Yeah. Any other feedback, guys?
Well, for me, Bitcoin is, in my opinion, Bitcoin is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. Definitely. I mean, I have a deep respect for Bitcoin and what they have done. They were pioneers. They have basically, it's a proof, for me, it's a proof of, concept of, blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So that we were all building on top and to build new technology,
right?
More advanced. As a user of Bitcoin, I have experienced at the peak of, end of last year when I sent a Bitcoin transactions, I paid $20 in fee, and I waited for like 3 or 4 days for it to go through. like an international wire transfer,
right?
In time and cost. So I saw a lot, and then I used Bitcoin Cash, and I saw a lot, like in terms of user, right? It costs much less, it's much faster. Bitcoin got better, obviously, with some improvements. And I like how they put it that Bitcoin is slow until it isn't, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's here to stay, definitely.
Yeah.
But I'm more excited about EOS.
Sure.
I do invest in other coins and not invest, but small investments. And for me, it's not about particular coins or their speculative value, but it's more about projects behind them. I'm actually investing in projects that I like.
Sure.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And
real quick, another note too is if you use Steem for any amount of time, you will be ruined for every other cryptocurrency on the planet because it's 3 second guaranteed, like it's there and it costs you nothing. And once you start using that, you're like, why am I paying fees on any other network and waiting for confirmations when that might happen or they might not? So I think once more people use EOS, like I've used Steem, they're just going to realize this is the future.
Sure. Yeah. Any feedback from you, Theo, or should we move to closing it up?
Well, sure. I mean, as a non-major Bitcoin holder that's been fascinated by it, what I can say is that it's gotten Bitcoin is a technology, but it's also a myth, right? It's a story. It's a myth that was created by a diverse community that reflects a certain ideology that I support. Right. And to understand that they were the first technology of its kind like that, and they gained traction in a particular kind of community. And from that place came, blockchain 2.0 like Ethereum, blockchain 3.0 like EOS. It basically gave birth to an entire revolution. So it's probably going to continue to be around for a long time. But more than anything, what it actually brought forward from like a philosophical and visionary and story level has changed the entire global culture in ways that we're only beginning to see on different levels.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. So what do you think? What's the biggest misconception about EOS? Like, if there was one thing that you could change that you've heard from, people asking questions or people, hate posting on Reddit or whatever, like what's one thing you could just, if you could clear it up and never hear it again, what would that be?
Oh, there's a lot. I would say, there's a couple. So one would be, it's not the utopian savior, and it's not the scammy crap coin, and it's it's also not the centralized scam coin, because I see that often. We feel like, oh, it's just centralized, and I say, how many mining farms run Bitcoin again? It's like 3, 4, maybe. We have 21 independent producers, and they can be voted out in moments. So I think it's just a matter of recognizing it's not our savior, and it's not a scam. It's somewhere in the middle, and it's up to us to actually engage with it, understand it, and even though it's complicated and a little scary at first to understand something different than what people are used to, that doesn't mean it's not a great technology, and it's not backed by somebody, in my opinion, there's one of the most prolific blockchain developers on the planet. BitShares and Steam are running more transactions than all the other blockchains combined. And I get really confused why people don't just recognize that from a technological perspective, to give props to say, hey, we may not agree with X, Y, or Z, but the facts remain. This is a very, very effective developer of blockchains at this stage. So I think EOS is going to do very well because of that.
For sure. Eugene, what do you think?
And there is no mining of EOS.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
Sure. How about you, Theo?
That it's not a security, it's a utility. That it's something that people can actually build upon. That it's something that is going to serve so many new functions that we can't even imagine. A lot of people, I'm relatively new to the investment side of the stuff, even though I've been following the tech for a long time. Yeah. But, a lot of people who are totally oblivious to it are saying, what's going to help me 10x or 100x, or what am I going to do? And they have this list of stuff, and they have, I'm not going to name other coins, I'm not going to diss anybody or other companies, but they have these really shady, overinflated companies on the same list as EOS. Yeah. I'll be like, hey, have you looked at EOS? They're like, oh, no, it's $9, it's $12, it's too late for me. And I was like, well, Ethereum and Bitcoin were that price at some point too. And, the point of it is, if it's going to be a use value, when these things emerge as major use cases as a utility token, that's when people are going to see that, oh, it's not just something that you're going to get your money turned around as a coin. It's something that you can really put a stake in and believe in what's being developed and created. And then also the next level would be, how can they participate in that? Can they be using different apps, or DApps? Can they be using other technologies in their own life? And so it's going to take some time. EOS has to tell a bigger story, and that's emerging right now. So it's super exciting.
Very cool. Good answers, guys. Is there anything I missed, or is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to before we closed? Is there something you wish I asked? How would you like to close it?
Well, I just wanted, if I could, just thank, Rob and Michael from the EOS DAC team. I mean, I'm sitting here, but we've got, and Will, and I mean, the whole group of people that represent our DAC, and it's really a privilege and an honor to sit here and be like the EOS DAC guy. But really, it's a really amazing team. Pramod, Murti, so many different people on the team. Daniel, I just could go on and on. Sunny Suyong, it's just everyone's doing incredible work, and it's amazing to think how decentralized it's becoming, and it's going to only become more so. And so I just want to thank the whole EOS DAC team. You guys are awesome. You're doing incredible work.
Very cool.
Yeah, and on that same note, it's guys like Luke that got me inspired into the space. And so I want to thank EOS DAC for really setting an important standard, and also thank Eugene and EOS Tribe for basically bringing forward these not just incredible stable technologies to make a secure network, but also to keep going with that larger positive vision about what the EOS network, can evolve into. Because honestly, it's the ideas that you guys are sharing that keep guys like me wanting to stay involved. So I think this being in the presence and knowing there are so many brilliant block producers, in EOS DAC and EOS Tribe in particular, who are really kind of moving forward with a big vision, like that's freaking exciting. It's really exciting.
Thank you, and it's really exciting for me to see other people getting excited about EOS, and you don't see it very often. Just people in general getting excited about technology, new technology. I worked with guys, EOS DAC, Michael Yates is great, and Eric at EOS Sweden. So many guys, smart guys, EOS 42, all of those guys, and Crypto Alliance as well. I would I would like all of them to be and continue to be supporting EOS blockchain. So, and I'd like to just ask regular token holders to really, do research, look into independent candidates and support technical independent candidates who will be able to support in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. I got a couple of questions. I got people pinging me saying, "Hey, Kurt, we need a couple more things. Do you guys have a couple more minutes to go over a couple more?" All right, cool. I've got Felix, a member of our group, asking actually a couple of questions here. What do you think about building a currency, like a completely different named currency on top of EOS? Like, let's say, I wanted to build Kurt Coin and distribute it around the world, and would that make sense, or does it make sense to just use EOS as currency, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would absolutely say there's going to be hopefully thousands or even tens of thousands of currencies on top of it. EOS DAC is an example that we may be one of the first. We're working on that right now. Yep. There's a great video by Andreas Antonopoulos where he talks about currency as language, and he talks about it to be a form of expression, to use whatever language, whatever currency that you like, maybe to represent the band or the the hobby you have. So I think this is a new paradigm shift for us in that. Governments used to be the only ones that could create that story of value that we'd all believe. But now we have the power to create that story of value. And I have many friends of mine who have their own token, and they create their own token, they create their own markets for it, and they create their own following of people that are excited about the value they bring to the world. And so I hope to see many, many tokens on EOS.
Awesome.
Yep.
Very
cool.
Yep. A couple of people asking about RAM. What is RAM in the EOS ecosystem? A couple of people are saying, can I stake or lend my RAM? This kind of thing. I'm not even sure what that is. Maybe give us the 30,000-foot view on that.
So RAM is so you buy RAM just like any resource, network or CPU RAM. You stake certain amount of EOS for RAM, and as an individual account, you don't need much. You don't need to buy a lot.
Okay.
When you run distributed app, depending on requirements, you might stake certain amount for that RAM, but the cost of the RAM will change. Just like on any market, we use, I believe, Banker algorithm to determine a price. It's highly technical. I glanced over that white paper. I can't explain it. But it will basically I can explain it in simple terms, but it basically dynamically determines the price of RAM, and that will fluctuate. And we intentionally start with a cap size of RAM, like a small amount, to avoid hoarding of the RAM initially. So only consume as much as you need. That's a message.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the basic idea that behind that is a lot of other blockchains, you have to pay money to transact on the blockchain. Well, obviously, if I'm a user coming to use your application, and the first thing I'm told is you have to pay money to use the application, then no one's going to use the application. There's a loss aversion, all that. And Steam was kind of the first one. Even BitShares had fees, but Steam was the first one that didn't have fees. And now this is the next evolution. So there's this concept of a bandwidth. And actually, it's funny, just to dare to the Steam company is still, the Steam Incorporated is evolving their version of this as well. They came up with a new idea recently. So I love these competing ideas of how we're going to do this bandwidth concept, but it's essentially that. It's a way to say, I know I'm going to have 1 million users, let's say, using my application, and I'm going to have enough resources on the EOS blockchain in order for them to transact in a consistent way. And that's where Shintai and some other different marketplaces will come into place, where you can kind of rent bandwidth, you can rent delegated EOS to you so that you can actually support your users. But it's just like Theo was saying, it creates this utility use for this token. That's a really beautiful thing. So that it's not just speculation. Now, I say this often that when cryptocurrency speculators and investors, once they see utility, they kind of get a little scared, because then it's no longer like the irrational part of their brain. Then it's the logic reason part of the brain. And then they're like, wait, I have to compare this to all the other like non-blockchain, competitors in this space, in this, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, let's move to the next 10x, crappy SEO. So it's just it's going to be a while before we have our kind of .com moment where there's a bubble, and then we realize like who are the Amazons, who are the Microsofts, who are the Googles that are still here. And I think that the things that EOS is doing, such as that RAM concept, where it's like, hey, your users aren't going to pay. You're gonna support your users just like you would if you were using a standard infrastructure, but you're essentially getting that for free almost from the block producers who are getting paid by the inflation.
Right, for sure. How about anybody that wants to work work with a block producer? Like, I have a couple people in our pro group who have computer science backgrounds, that kind of thing, saying like, hey, like this is probably something I could help participate in. Is there like a help wanted area in the EOS universe that they can check out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Luke answer in a second, but meeting with a lot of different block producer candidates and stuff in the past few weeks and just learning more about the space, it's growing. And so, there's always need for good technologists, good developers, and that sort of thing. I mean, if anyone's excited to get involved in the blockchain future, EOS is a really solid place to go. I'll let Eugene and Luke, address how to contact them or whatever, but I mean, all hands on deck. This is a revolution, and whoever wants to participate, bring their skills forward and they'll find use for it.
Sure.
It's definitely rapidly growing, and we will definitely have needs for additional hands as we grow, as operations will grow. But you need to come to this with a different mindset, not your day-to-day job for a paycheck, but it's a different paradigm. So you have to come to this prepared, basically. It's not enough to be a technologist and to have a computer science degree. You have to buy into this model. So
a big part of the mind shift. I did a post a while back about this, that I think like even the concept of jobs are going away. It's going to be more this idea of a worker proposal that you engage with for a period of time because it's your passion. And that's really what we want to enable as EOS DAC and also EOS as well. Right. They're going to be these worker proposals. So I would highly recommend anybody that wants to get involved in this. EOS DAC might be a great place for you to start getting involved because we're a distributed, decentralized system. You don't have to interview and get a job, that kind of a deal. It's really going to be, go to eosdac.io, check out our Telegram, check out our Discord, sign up for our newsletter, and really get engaged to the community and just realize like, okay, here's all the things that they're doing. Here's what I'm good at. I can jump in and help there. And it's really, once we get it up and running, it's really going to be a very decentralized approach. We're going to have our custodians that are voted in, and we're going to have these worker proposals, and you can just submit a worker proposal. You can find one that you want, and you can engage with that and provide value. And then the custodians will pay those out, and you'll get paid through our smart contracts. So it's a really exciting kind of new future, and it's going to change a lot of people's mindsets. They'll be like, wait, you mean I can just be home with my family and I don't have to have a 9-to-5 job anymore, and I can work when I want to and stay up late and get up early, or vice versa. And it is a big shift in people's mindsets, but I think it's going to be one that they're going to love, when they have that autonomy that they can have with this.
Yeah, cool. On that same note, along with what Luke is saying, I would just recommend anybody who's watching or who's fascinated by it to just explore some of the block producers that are interesting and delve into those communities. On Telegram, obviously Twitter and other sources of media, YouTube channels and stuff, Medium, Steam it, and just really delve into the space and figure out which groups are headed in a direction that a developer or a technologist or a media strategist or whatever would want to be a part of, and then hang out with those groups. And if there's an entry point that somebody sees that they could fill, then just start up a chat with some of the core members. That's how people get jobs, really.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So as a head of a trading community, a lot of people, like everybody's, what price should a EOS be, that kind of thing. And I actually, it's funny because I come at this from both sides. Like, yes, I am a professional trader, but I'm also, I'm in this all for philosophical reasons. So I find myself arguing with like both sides of me, having these conversations all the time. But I've had a couple people ask, like, do you think EOS could be the #1 market cap coin? Like, could EOS, like, I know you guys don't want to replace everything else. Like, not everything else has to die, but could EOS be, the $1 trillion coin and everything else is, trailing behind in some regard? Is that possible?
One of the thoughts I have on that is just comparing it to Ethereum as an example. You could look at, what the price of Ethereum is, how many tokens there are, and then you could look at the price of EOS and how many tokens there are. And you could do some basic math and say, well, either Ethereum is way overvalued or EOS is way undervalued as far as its technical performance capabilities. Now, as far as like becoming the Bitcoin, taking over Bitcoin, I think about that in terms of there's a problem in our space right now because of centralized exchanges. And this is actually something EOS is going to solve and help solve. It's the concept of the DEX. This is something that BitShares started and is going to continue. So once there's decentralized exchanges where anybody can trade any token on any token pair, I think we're gonna start seeing the removal of the kind of crypto global world reserve currency that we have with Bitcoin. So much of the market moves up and down based on Bitcoin because it's the main pair everybody compares to. And so I think that part of Bitcoin's dominance will change once there's other technological options where people will never feel the need to go back into Bitcoin in order to do X, Y, or Z. It's just they can stay in the coin that they like, and there's going to be enough liquidity, cross-atomic swaps, and the ability to just do whatever they want. I think that will really change the ecosystem in quite a bunch of interesting ways. Now, whether or not it'll be the number, like even market cap is probably not the best way to even think about a coin. I know it's the one we all think about, but it's really kind of a poor approach. It's like, you can't really sell it for all that money, right? It's not real. It's just a number we throw up there because we like to have a story that we like to find patterns even if they're not there,
Sure. Yeah, for sure. So, all right.
But is it going to be more valuable than Ethereum? I think so, yes. In short, I think in different ways, functionality wise. That's all I'm going to say.
Yep, and I would agree. It's funny. I've gotten a lot of hate for a long time. As a member of or as a leader in the crypto traders community, people talking about Ethereum's going to replace Bitcoin, et cetera. And I keep telling everybody like, well, Ethereum's got a lot of problems, guys. That kind of thing. And people want to really, really shut me down. But EOS is one of the projects. Like I said, I discovered EOS in September. I'm a Dan Larimer fan, so I looked into it more deeply than I would normally have. It was one I was recommending to our pro community at the very inception of it. I got people in the group that were buying it under $1, and super, super excited to see where it's at. Even today, as we're quite a bit down again with these big fluctuations, but it's been a good long term. I got a couple of guys in the group. In fact, I should give them shout outs. I'm going to say hi to Bill and Felix, who both are big advocates of EOS in the community as well. So they're going to appreciate getting the shout out. But I just want to say thanks, guys. I really appreciate you coming on, spending hour and a half late at night and having a good time. So any shout outs? Does anybody need a hello to anybody or anything like that before we close?
I kind of did mine already. So thanks, EOS DAC.
Yeah. Good then? All right, cool.
Thank you for having us.
Kurt. Thank you, man. Yeah, thank you so much to your viewers, too, for tuning in.
Yeah. I very much appreciate it. So this is episode 7, Coincast. I'm Kurt Wookert Jr. For CryptoTradersPro.com. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to have a couple of you guys, maybe all of you guys back soon so we can do a little more because there's a lot going on in the EOS community, I imagine. If we were to come back in a month, we'd be having whole different conversations. So thanks again. Wrapping up. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.